In last episode, having made the choice to enter the Demon Land for negotiation with Demon King, the group is now trapped, surrounded on all sides by the Demon King's forces. Grog reached back, lifted his axe, and placed it on the ground between them. The metal struck stone with a dull sound. He straightened slowly as the demon soldiers closed in, unarmed, unbowed, and waiting. The gates of the demon fortress rose behind them like a wall of judgment. Demon soldiers closed in from every direction, boots striking stone in measured rhythm. Torchlight flickered across drawn weapons as heavy chains were pulled forward, their metal links scraping loudly against the ground. The trio did not resist. They stood still, surrounded by force that waited for orders rather than blood. Far within the fortress, a lone messenger knelt before the Demon King. His voice was careful as he delivered the report, naming Grog without embellishment. Firelight danced along the throne room walls, but no one spoke once the message ended. The silence that followed carried more weight than any command. Memory stirred. Years earlier, in that same fortress, a young Varen stood alone in the courtyard. Larger demons moved around him in slow circles, their laughter low and deliberate. He was smaller, marked by whispers of his birth, the son of a mistress, tolerated but never defended. The courtyard belonged to strength, and he had none yet. Varen's fists clenched until pain drowned out humiliation. Bruises darkened his skin, but he refused to cry. Tears were remembered here. Weakness lingered longer than wounds, and he would not let them have that. The circling stopped. A figure stepped forward, broad and armored, bearing the marks of an elite orc squad leader. Grog moved without haste, placing himself squarely between Varen and the others. His presence was firm, undeniable, and final. Grog turned to Varen and bowed his head slightly. The gesture was small, but it was deliberate. Not mockery, not obligation. Respect. In a fortress where power was taken, not given, it was the first time Varen had ever received it freely. Grog straightened and faced the bullies. His gaze alone was enough. No threats were spoken, no weapons raised. One by one, the larger demons stepped back, irritation plain on their faces as they retreated. The courtyard emptied, leaving only quiet and a boy who had not been abandoned. From that day on, Grog walked beside Varen through the fortress halls. He spoke plainly as they moved, about discipline, about restraint, about the difference between strength that protects and strength that destroys. His words were not speeches. They were lessons meant to be practiced. Varen listened to every word. Grog spoke of guarding the weak not with mercy, but with resolve, of standing firm when others would strike downward. For the first time, the idea of becoming strong carried purpose instead of hunger. At night, when the fortress slept, Varen returned to the courtyard alone. By firelight, he repeated Grog's stances again and again. His muscles ached, his breath burned, but he did not stop. Each movement was a promise, to become strong enough that no one would be left standing alone again. After several nights of watching from a distance, Grog finally stepped into the training yard. He corrected Varen's stance without raising his voice, guiding shoulders and footing with patient hands. The lesson was simple. Strength began with control, not force. Varen struck again, this time clean. The impact landed true. For a brief moment, surprise crossed his face, followed by something unfamiliar. He smiled, just slightly, as if unsure whether he was allowed to. Years passed. Varen grew stronger, faster, relentless in his training. He faced every elite youth placed before him, including the Demon King's other children, and defeated them openly. Respect followed where mockery once stood, earned through visible strength beneath the sunlit yard. Grog now bore the full markings of a general. With his father retired, he stood as one of the 4 commanders of the demon army, carrying the authority of the orc clans. He remained behind Varen, not as a guard, but as proof of where strength and loyalty could lead. The coronation fires were lit. Ritual chants echoed through the fortress as banners unfurled and flames climbed skyward. Varen stepped forward to claim the crown, the weight of the moment pressing upon every gathered soul. As the ceremony reached its height, Varen searched the crowd. His gaze found Grog. No words passed between them, but gratitude moved quietly through the space they shared. When called, Grog stepped forward and knelt. As one of the 4 commanders, his bow was formal, disciplined, and unwavering. Under Varen's rule, demon armies marched in ordered lines beneath their banners. From above, the new demon king watched forces move as one, strength organized, not scattered. The memory faded. In the present, Varen's hand tightened around the armrest of his throne. Firelight reflected in his eyes as the past released its hold, leaving only what must be decided now. Chains rattled softly in the vast throne room. The trio stood before the demon king and his court, iron restraints heavy against the stone floor. Firelight and shadow divided the hall as all eyes turned toward judgment. Grog stepped forward and bowed deeply before the throne. Chains shifted as he lowered himself, armor creaking under its own weight. When he spoke, his voice was steady and unadorned. He admitted abandoning his command. He named it a crime without excuse. The throne room listened in complete silence. Grog straightened and lifted his head. His gaze did not waver as he spoke again. The Demon Queen, he said, had not been killed by humans. The statement carried no anger, only certainty, delivered without fear of consequence. Kaito stepped forward next. He spoke briefly and precisely, laying out the assassination as a staged act. Timelines failed to align. Guard rotations contradicted reports. Entry points were altered after the fact. Each inconsistency was placed carefully, like a blade set exactly where it would cut deepest. Ilara followed, producing sealed testimonies taken from mercenaries captured during earlier fighting. She read their words aloud, accounts of payment, false orders, and planted evidence. Her tone remained calm, lending weight to every name and detail spoken. A low ripple moved through the demon court. Whispers spread between pillars and ranks. Certainty began to fracture as doubt took hold, the official story no longer sitting cleanly where it once had. Korvac surged forward, fury plain on his face. He shouted over the murmurs, demanding immediate execution. His posture was rigid, aggressive, as though violence alone could restore order to the room. Varen raised a single hand. The sound died instantly. His voice followed, measured and absolute. He ordered a full reinvestigation into the Demon Queen's death. No interruptions. No exceptions. The command left no space for argument. Elsewhere, in a modest demon residence far from the throne room, investigators pressed an elderly demon for answers. The witness sat on the floor amid scattered personal belongings, hands shaking as his composure finally broke. Torchlight flickered across the walls as he began to speak. The window shattered. An arrow tore through the room and struck the witness squarely in the chest. His words cut off mid-breath as he collapsed backward. Investigators spun toward the shadows, weapons half-drawn as panic exploded into motion. Shouts filled the residence. Figures moved fast, overturning furniture and scattering documents. Evidence vanished into smoke and flame as saboteurs struck with practiced precision, turning investigation into chaos before retreating into the dark. As the ambush unfolded, an orc soldier moved without hesitation. He stepped between the investigators and the incoming attack, shielding them with his own body. Blows struck armor meant for others, his resolve clear in every grounded step he took. Back in the throne room, voices rose sharply. Demon factions argued openly now, accusations flying where obedience once stood. Old loyalties cracked under the weight of doubt, and the court no longer spoke with one voice. Korvac watched the room shift against him. One by one, demons turned away or fell silent. His expression remained controlled, but anger burned tightly behind his eyes as support slipped from his grasp. Varen stood and spoke over the unrest. He condemned the internal sabotage without hesitation, naming betrayal as the true crime. His authority pressed down on the hall, forcing the chaos to pause, if only briefly. The pause did not last. The court split openly, orcs, beast folk, and giants stand united in one side and demons stepping toward different sides of the chamber. Lines were drawn across stone and shadow, not with banners, but with where bodies chose to stand. Korvac snapped. With a roar of fury, he lunged at Grog, striking with brutal confidence. Power flared around him as the attack came fast and heavy. Shock rippled through the officials nearby. From the throne, Varen watched closely, calm, almost knowing the outcome of this fight. Grog caught the blow effortlessly. His stance was calm, grounded, Nothing like the reckless force Korvac expected. The impact died in his grip. Around them, demons froze. Varen's gaze sharpened, intensity replacing certainty. Korvac pulled back, staring. This was not the Grog he remembered. Strength was still there, but refined, focused, held in check. For the first time, hesitation crept across Korvac's face. With a furious cry, Korvac transformed fully, power tearing outward as his true demon form emerged. The clash that followed shook the hall, stone cracking beneath their feet. Demons surrounding them recoiled in alarm, worry spreading quickly. Even Varen's expression tightened as the weight of the moment became clear. As steel met force, the sound faded into memory. Grog stood alone in exile years earlier, moving through training forms beneath a gray sky. Each motion was slow, deliberate, controlled, strength tempered not by battle, but by solitude and discipline. In exile, Kaito spars with Grog. The exchange was brief and controlled. When Grog overextended by habit, Kaito adjusted his footing or angle wordlessly, pointing out inefficiency rather than weakness. Grog accepted the correction without pride, understanding the value of an unclouded eye. Afterward, Ilara moved in close, her hands glowing softly as she closed wounds left by restraint rather than battle. She offered quiet words of encouragement, not praising strength, but the discipline it took to hold it back. The days blended together. Rain gave way to dust, cold to heat. The trio trained across changing ground and weather, repeating the same drills until movements no longer required thought. Time passed not in words, but in worn paths and practiced breath. Grog led each session. Kaito followed, learning by watching, speaking only when something small but important revealed itself. Again and again, Grog halted, finishing blows inches short of impact. Each pause demanded more control than the strike itself. What had once been instinct became choice, reinforced through deliberate practice. After one such moment, Kaito gave a short nod. It was not approval of power, but recognition of correction made and lesson learned. Grog acknowledged it with a glance and returned to stance. Ilara spoke once the weapons were lowered. Strength, she reminded him, must serve truth, or it would only create another tyrant. Grog listened in silence, absorbing the reminder as seriously as any battlefield command. At sunrise, Grog stood alone, looking out over the land. The path behind him was heavy with command and blood. The path ahead was narrower, but clearer. He stepped forward already knowing which one he would walk. The present crashed back in. Grog turned Korvac's strike aside with precise movement, redirecting raw force without effort. The difference was unmistakable. Korvac faltered. Confidence drained from his expression as he realized the fight no longer followed the rules he understood. This was not the general he remembered, and not a fight he could dominate. Snarling, Korvac hurled a smoke bomb to the ground. Thick haze swallowed the hall as sight vanished and chaos surged. When the air began to clear, he was gone. When the smoke began to thin, Korvac was gone. Soldiers rushed to secure the chamber, sealing passages and dragging the wounded clear. Orders were shouted, then repeated, but the damage had already spread beyond containment. Voices rose openly now. Demons pointed fingers where silence once ruled. Korvac's name was spoken with accusation, manipulation, cowardice, ambition laid bare. His absence only sharpened the verdict forming in the hall. Before the throne, representatives of the orcs, beast folk, and giants stepped forward together. They stood behind Varen without hesitation. Around them, Korvac's remaining loyalists, mostly elite demons, held back. Many did not draw weapons at all. They had seen the outcome coming and chose survival over pride. Varen spoke at last. His judgment was cold and precise. Korvac was declared discredited, his escape noted as proof rather than excuse. The words carried finality, stripping authority from a name that once commanded fear. Later, away from the court, Varen met the trio in quiet. From his hand, he passed a small signet. Simple, unadorned, but unmistakable. It marked credibility, not alliance. Trust given without chains. Varen faced Grog alone for a moment. He told him the truth plainly. His name could not be cleared in public. Not yet. But privately, there was no doubt left. He believed him fully. The trio departed demon territory under guarded escort. No cheers followed them, no curses either. Steel stayed lowered, eyes watchful. The neutrality was tense, but respected. Far from demon lands, along the elven border, scouts knelt before an elven commander. They reported unfamiliar troop movements, units bearing no single banner. Human formations moved alongside demon forces, coordinated and deliberate, a joint presence where none should exist. When word reached Alara, her reaction was immediate. The elven lands. Her jaw tightened as old memories stirred, unresolved, avoided, waiting. She knew she could not turn away forever. If the path led there next, she would face it. The trio walked toward the forested horizon as storm clouds gathered overhead. Wind moved through the trees ahead, heavy with promise and threat alike. The conflict had grown beyond demons now, and the road forward would demand more than any single truth. The forest at the elven border opened wide before them, alive with towering ancient trees and softly glowing foliage. Sunlight filtered through layered leaves, turning the air bright and green. Then the stillness broke. Elven patrols emerged from concealment, bows already drawn, their movements silent and practiced. The land was beautiful, but it was not welcoming. The moment the elves saw Alara walking beside an orc and a human, the mood shifted sharply. Spears lowered. Voices hardened. The patrol tightened its formation, hostility replacing caution as shadows cut across armored figures beneath the trees. An elven commander stepped forward, posture rigid and unyielding. His gaze passed over Alara without warmth before settling on the others. The order came clean and cold. If the orc and the human wished to enter elven land, they would disarm first, and submit to judgment. Kaito moved first. He knelt and placed his daggers on the forest floor, metal resting quietly among roots and leaves. Grog followed, lowering himself with deliberate care as he set his axe down beside him. Neither protested. Restraint was chosen, not demanded. Alara stepped forward alone. She left Grog and Kaito behind and walked toward the elven line, unarmed and unflinching. Before crossing fully into their custody, she turned slightly and spoke back to them, her voice calm and steady. "Trust me," she said. "Don't start a war at the gate." Memory stirred. A decade earlier, under the same forest canopy, a younger Alara ran through the night carrying a small, sleeping Kaito in her arms. Moonlight broke through the leaves in fractured silver as urgency drove her forward, branches tearing at her clothes. She glanced back once, toward distant elven lights fading between the trees. Fear tightened her chest, but resolve pushed her onward. The village was behind her now. There would be no turning back. Dawn found her near a human road outside a nearby city. Exhaustion finally gave way as she collapsed to the ground, still curled protectively around Kaito. Pale morning light washed over them as the forest fell silent behind her. The sound of wheels approached. A monk's cart slowed and came to a stop nearby. From the driver's seat, Tenzu looked down, surprise plain on his face as he took in the sight before him, an elven girl shielding a human child. Tenzu knelt beside them, studying Alara's posture even in sleep, how her arms never loosened around the boy. Something in that quiet act moved him deeply. Without urgency or judgment, he reached out, took them in under his protection in monastery. Within the monastery courtyard, Alara practiced her elven magic each day. Her movements were precise and balanced, light responding naturally to her hands. Monks watched from a respectful distance, recognizing discipline shaped not by ritual alone, but by patience and control. Nearby, Alara guided young Kaito through basic combat stances. She corrected his footing gently, adjusting posture and balance rather than speed or strength. Her instruction was patient, shaped by care rather than urgency, as sunlight filtered quietly across the stone. As Kaito grew, the monks took over his physical training. They drilled him in disciplined hand-to-hand combat, emphasizing breath, awareness, and restraint. Movements repeated until they became instinct, calm focus replacing childhood clumsiness. From time to time, groups of undercover humans rebel visits the monastery. Rebels delivered food to the monastery orphanage, exchanging few words and no names. Trust formed quietly, built on shared purpose rather than allegiance. As Kaito grew older and stronger, those same rebels began teaching him more dangerous skills. They demonstrated assassin techniques in controlled silence. How to move unseen, how to strike efficiently, how to survive when no help was coming. Kaito listened, practiced, and endured. Years passed. Ilara and Kaito began escorting refugees alongside the monks, guiding them across dangerous roads. Weather changed, routes shifted, threats came and went, but they continued again and again, carrying responsibility as naturally as they once carried fear. On one such road they saw him for the first time. In the distance, a wounded orc lay surrounded by both the human and demon armies. Ilara and Kaito approached cautiously, unaware that this meeting would bind their paths into something far greater than either expected. The present returned. Kaito lowered his gaze, fists tightening at his sides. Understanding settled heavily in his chest. Ilara was standing alone in elven custody because of him, because she had chosen him once, and was choosing him again now. The elven council chamber stood in solemn grandeur, ancient stone etched with living runes and bathed in soft forest light. At the center sat Eltharin, chief of the elven council and Ilara's grandfather, age having softened his presence but not his authority. To his right sat Veilira, captain of the elven tribes and Ilara's aunt, rigid in posture and unbending in her devotion to tradition. To his left sat Lithiel, queen of the elves and Ilara's mother, composed, watchful, and carefully distant. Before them all, Ilara stood alone, facing not only the judgment of the council, but the weight of family, history, and choice intertwined. Around the chamber, council members watched her closely. Some held their chins high with stern judgment. Others shifted uneasily, eyes lingering with quiet admiration. The divide was unmistakable, between those shaped by old scars and those drawn toward a wider world Ilara represented. Veilira rose and addressed the council. Her voice was firm, trained by decades of command. Banners of the old elven clans hung behind her, their symbols heavy with memory and warning. The room tightened as she spoke. She gestured sharply, recounting the cost of forgetting tradition. Outsiders had once exploited elven kindness, she said. Humans and demons had enslaved elves, sold them, broken them. Isolation had not been pride, it had been survival. Ilara's defiance, she concluded, endangered them all. Several elder council members nodded in agreement. Their expressions were weathered, hardened by loss remembered more clearly than hope. For them, the past was not distant, it was instruction. Queen Lithiel stood slowly. When she spoke, her tone was calm and measured, neither defensive nor indulgent. She acknowledged the weight of tradition, but reminded the council that the forest had changed, and so had its people. She spoke of the younger generation, restless and curious, drawn toward the world beyond the trees. Her gaze rested briefly on Ilara, not as a mother, but as a queen recognizing what could no longer be ignored. Silence returned to the chamber, thicker now. Tradition and reform faced one another across the stone floor, neither yielding, both waiting. Ilara stepped forward. Light from above framed her where she stood, alone and unarmed. She did not bow. She did not raise her voice. She met the council's gaze without hesitation. Her words cut through the stillness. She asked whether tradition mattered more than humanity. As she spoke, memory pulled her back, to the night her father chose to protect children over law, and paid for it with his life. Firelight burned in Ilara's memory. Former elven king Thalen stood unmoving, holding a human infant tight against his chest. The assassins demanded the child be handed over. Thalen refused without raising his voice. The baby, Kaito, cried once, then went silent as Thalen turned his body to shield him completely. In that moment, the king chose humanity over law. The blades came. Thalen fell beneath them, never loosening his grip until the last breath left him. From hiding, Ilara watched in horror as the assassins withdrew, not victorious, but interrupted. Elven war horns sounded in the distance. Assassin had to run away. The king was dead, but the child was alive. The present returned. Tears traced Ilara's face, but she did not lower her head. Her voice carried through the chamber as she named the truth plainly. Her father had died buying time, for a child this council once deemed unworthy of protection. Across the chamber, council members shifted uneasily. Whispers spread, not of rebellion, but recognition. Many now understood what that night had truly cost, and what it had preserved. Eltharin lowered his gaze. He remembered standing against keeping the child. Remembered insisting tradition would protect them all. Regret settled deep in his features as Alara stood living proof of the price he had been willing to pay. The council moved to vote. Eltharin standing next to his twin brother, regret on his face visible clearly. Glowing tokens were placed upon the stone table with ritual calm, each one carrying more than judgment, carrying history. The tally settled into an even split. Veilira allowed herself a faint, knowing smile. In a tie, the final vote would fall to the council chief, and she was certain what tradition would demand of him. The council doors slammed open. Guards rushed in, breathless, breaking the ritual without apology. Their urgency cut straight through tradition. They reported a joint force, human and demon, approaching the forest borders. Coordinated. Deliberate. Exactly the kind of threat isolation was meant to prevent, and had failed to. The chamber erupted into motion. Council members rose, shock rippling through old certainties. Ilara's question hung unanswered in the air. If tradition could not protect the innocent then, or now, what was it truly guarding? War horns echoed through the forest edge, their deep calls rolling between ancient trunks like a waking heartbeat. Elven forces mobilized with practiced speed, armor and bows moving in disciplined silence. Green light pulsed along hidden paths as units took their positions, leaves trembling as if the forest itself sensed the violence about to break free. At the front line, Grog, Kaito, and Alara regrouped without a word exchanged. Weapons were checked, grips adjusted, stances aligned. Their breathing was slow, controlled, untouched by fear. This was not preparation for holding ground. This was the calm before cutting through it. The clash came like a breaking wave. Combined human and demon forces surged toward the forest, colliding with elven defenders at the boundary line. Arrows streaked overhead, darkening the air, but the true momentum moved forward with the trio, pressing directly into the heart of the enemy formation. Grog charged first. His advance was unstoppable, each step shaking the ground beneath him. He tore through the front ranks with overwhelming disciplined force, strikes delivered not in rage, but with intent. Shields shattered, soldiers were thrown aside, and formations collapsed as panic replaced command in their eyes. Kaito flowed through the openings Grog created like a shadow given purpose. He moved unseen between strikes, dismantling enemy formations before they could even react. Where Grog broke lines, Kaito erased them. Watching the two fight as one, against an army, left elven soldiers frozen in disbelief. This was not chaos. This was understanding made lethal. Behind them, Ilara planted her staff and reached deeper. Golden-green light surged outward in a widening pulse, wrapping wounded elves in warmth and restoration. Flesh closed, breath steadied, pain dissolved into relief. It was not healing cast in haste. It was authority made manifest. Among the watching council and soldiers, recognition spread in stunned silence. This power had not been seen since Thalen. The forest spirit had chosen again. From the high branches and ridges, elven archers released careful volleys in support, guiding the flow of battle rather than leading it. Their arrows struck true, but even they watched in awe as victory unfolded largely without their aid. For the first time in generations, the elves did not merely defend their forest, they witnessed what it meant to fight alongside those who walked beyond it. The enemy line finally broke. What remained of their formation dissolved into panic as soldiers turned and fled, weapons discarded in desperation. Smoke and confusion swallowed their retreat, morale collapsing faster than the forest could reclaim the scarred ground beneath their feet. Silence followed. The battlefield settled into an uneasy stillness, and among the fallen, not a single elven casualty could be found. Awe spread through the ranks, moving from soldiers to council observers alike. High above the field, Veilira stood rigid, realization tightening her expression. The outcome had changed everything. The vote she had been so certain of no longer belonged to tradition alone. At the forest's edge, a human general was dragged forward and forced to his knees. His armor was cracked, his posture broken. Defiance flickered briefly before fading as judgment closed in under the harsh light of day. Under pressure, the general, Erden, finally broke. His confession spilled out in fragments. The army had not been sent by any king, human or demon. It had been organized by the Merchant Guild, aided by corrupt human ministers and a demon general working in secret. War, he admitted, was only a tool. Profit and power were the true goals. To seize control, the human child rescued years ago by the elven king had to die. That night, the doors had been opened from within. There had been a traitor among the elves. Erden's gaze shifted suddenly toward Kaito. Recognition dawned across his face. His voice dropped as understanding connected old orders to the present moment. He began to speak about who Kaito truly was, and why the assassination attempt years ago had been so carefully planned. The words never came. An arrow tore through Erden's throat mid-breath. He collapsed instantly, shock freezing every witness in place. The shot had come from elven lines. Nearby, the traitor was seized. Selwyn. Before a single question could be asked, he bit down on a hidden capsule. His body stiffened, then fell limp. Silence spread once more. The truth had been buried again, deliberately, efficiently, and far too late to ignore. The Elven Council reconvened in measured silence. The storm had passed, leaving the chamber calmer but heavier than before. Voting tokens were reset upon the stone table, their glow steady and neutral, as if the ritual itself waited to see whether anything had truly changed. As the new tally was prepared, Veilira glanced at the previous vote record. Her eyes lingered there longer than necessary. She saw it clearly now. The chief's mark had never changed. Even before the battle, even before the proof, Eltharin had already chosen Ilara. A faint, bitter smile crossed Veilira's face as she accepted what that meant. The final result was declared. One vote stood against Ilara. All others favored her. Ilara was cleared of wrongdoing. She stood before the council calm and composed, but distant, acknowledging the decision without relief or triumph. This was judgment rendered, not belonging restored. Later, beneath the canopy of ancient trees, Ilara departed the forest alongside Grog and Kaito. Sunlight filtered through leaves one last time as familiar paths fell away behind them. She did not look back, not because she felt unwelcome, but because she had already chosen where she stood. As they walked, Grog began quietly teaching Kaito simple battlefield hand signals. Old habits passed on without ceremony. Left. Halt. Watch the ridge. The lessons were practical, grounded, and meant as distraction as much as preparation. The forest thinned as the road stretched toward human lands. Overhead, clouds gathered, muting the light and weighing down the horizon. The journey forward felt heavier than the one behind them. Kaito walked a few steps behind the others. His gaze stayed fixed on the road, thoughts distant and unresolved. Words he had almost heard echoed louder than any confession that had been spoken. The elven forest receded into the distance as open land spread out ahead. Old borders faded behind them, replaced by uncertainty and unfinished truths. Whatever awaited next would not be confined to one realm, and neither would they. Next episode. Kaito's past is finally revealed. Discover his true identity and the dark reason why assassins from the human kingdom have hunted him since he was a baby. If you enjoy our content, please like, share, and let us know your opinions in the comments below. We'll see you next Friday for the next episode.